you make yourself vulnerable, and that's what artists do, and even authors.
And I said, well, then you won't know what it's about.
Yeah.
And there are horror stories, and I've written about some of the horror stories in that book.
Well, good day, everybody. You're on Bestley here, and I'm very excited today to be sitting with Michael H. Warren, an author, a prolific author, and we are here today to get to know Michael a little bit more, to see what he's about, where he's from, what is his story, what are his stories about, etc. So thank you so much for joining us and coming along for the ride. Michael, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, really excited to introduce the people to the man behind the stories. I was thinking earlier today, creating stories is like creating art, isn't it?
I would say it is.
In a sense.
It takes you down a road that you would have to consider to be somewhat different to the way probably a lot of people think. It requires a lot of creativity, innovation, and I would say that it makes you really test your own senses and what you think about.
Yeah, that's true. And for me, that's the same as with creative arts, visual arts. Even I'm a musician, so for me, it's like songwriting. When you write something, even when I write a lyric for a song, I feel like I'm putting a bit of myself out there. You make yourself vulnerable, and that's what artists do, and even authors. So it was just an interesting thought to me this morning. So tell the people, who is Michael H. Warren?
Oh, Michael H. Warren is, in many respects, a non-entity, but somebody who has taken his own ideas and his thoughts and created a different world and different worlds in his own head, and decided to put these down on paper, the proverbial paper, or now it's called electronic paper, and to share it with the world, because I think I've got things to share with the world.
Correct. Yeah, I love that. We cannot help, when we have strong ideas about things, we cannot help but share it with people.
Right.
And if that could line up with our passions, and with our natural instincts, and with our giftings,
right,
be it visual or words or music, then that's going to get our message across. So where did it all start for you? I mean, have you been an author all your life?
Okay, this is all very interesting. I worked for a government department, and I'd already worked for quite a number of years when I decided that life was getting a bit boring for me. And there were stories inside me, and they had to be told. And the very first one was the one that I conceptualized in only 2009. And it took me 2.5 years to write, because it was actually a memoir. It's an autobiography. It's a very controversial looking book.
Okay.
The cover looks incredibly controversial to those who judge books by their covers, and I've had a number of them in my family and in my friends and from strangers who said, how could I have done what I did?
Okay.
And my response to them was, have you read the book? And their response was, why do I have to? And I said, well, then you won't know what it's about.
Yeah.
So the very first book was about being a South African white male who went through a period of conscription, forced conscription to the army or to the armed services at that stage, because you could go to the army, you could go to the Air Force or the Navy. But what it was about was a book that I entitled with a main title called In the Name of God, and it's got a very specific reason for being called In the Name of God. And the second title is the most difficult one for people to get past, especially with our history in South Africa and probably in the world. And I called it Defending Apartheid.
Okay.
Now, the question is, how could anybody defend apartheid? Well, I would be the first one to admit you can't. The defending apartheid I was speaking about was that we as white males were forced into conscription for, at that period, a minimum of 2 years.
Yeah.
And we had 720 days of camps after that. And for that period of time, when I was serving, it was after I was at university. I went to WITS and I studied a BSc biochemistry.
Okay.
And I went after varsity, and we were grouped differently to the youngsters that came to this specific camp we were at. It was at Oudtshoorn. It was an officers' camp. It was an officers' training camp. And I was lumped in with the teachers, yet I wasn't a teacher.
Okay.
I did apply to go elsewhere, and when we were at school, at high school, it started in Standard 8, which would be grade 10 nowadays, where you got your first invitation. And everybody's first invitation was to Walvis Bay, which is Walvis Bay in Southwest Africa, which is now Namibia.
Yeah.
And nobody wanted to go there because all you see is seagulls and sand dunes and very cold water.
It's quite beautiful there, though.
It's very beautiful, but it's not a place to go and live and stay and do your army duty.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So if you wanted to run away from all of this in South Africa, you had to exile yourself, and that means you had to leave the country. There were a number of people that exiled themselves, especially those when I was at varsity that I knew that actually left, and they left South Africa. Some of them I wouldn't call they were close friends, but they were friends, and I knew about them. And then there were others that joined the anti-apartheid movement at the time. For me, it was a case of, well, I had a lot of growing up to do. I didn't think too much about the politics. I just wanted to get it over and done with.
Yeah.
And so that story led into that part of my life. And I went to Oudtshoorn. I went to Southwest Africa at that time, now Namibia, and I went into Angola, came back. Second year, I went up to 113 Battalion, which is Letaba Ranch. It's near Guyana, but it's actually right on the Letaba River near the game reserve, the Kruger National Park. But we were ferried up all the way to the Limpopo border, which is called Madimbo, and we stayed at a place called Mabaligwe. And that was barely a kilometer and a half from the northernmost gate, the Pafuri Gate. And we patrolled that area, and we supposedly looked after it and protected South Africa from all these foreign and local terrorists, as they would call them.
Right, yeah.
So I'm telling you a bit of the story. When I actually wanted to say, I started writing in 2009. It took me 2.5 years to get everything accurately down.
Yeah.
To actually confer with some of my old friends who were with me. But I did a lot of the research on my own, and I just checked up what the government standards were and their requirements and their laws and their regulations and their threats to those who wouldn't go to the army. And for example, the Jehovah's Witnesses who refused to go to the army because of their beliefs, they were put in jail for 6 years. So we have this terrible thing that we've been through, a lot of us. Some worse than others. I don't think I had it bad at all. I think others had it much worse than I did.
Yeah.
But I believe that these stories aren't told because white South African males of that era don't want to speak about it. It brings a lot of PTSD trauma back into their lives, and definitely what they went through. And there are horror stories, and I've written about some of the horror stories in that book.
Sure.
But there are also the most incredible stories of life and just survival and instinct and adventure that you wouldn't even expect from a book like that. And that's why I wrote it.
Wow, it sounds so interesting to me. Interestingly, while I was at university in the early 90s, the mandatory going to the army fell away.
Yes.
And because I studied and I qualified and I got a job, I never went. So I'm always interested in the stories of people who had to do the mandatory service, So it sounds to me like this whole thing is really about identity. Well, as a white
Yeah,
South African
Johan,
man?
I would say it's got a lot to do with identity. It is who I am today. A lot of it is. I would say that I learnt a lot out of it. Was it all good? No. Was it all bad? Definitely not.
Okay.
But it made me learn about myself and my capabilities and my endurance and my instinct for survival in a very, very unfriendly world.
Yeah. Fair enough.
And I do write about those things. I do name people. I've changed a few names that are affected too closely to me.
Okay.
I've changed their names slightly, but others I've given them the exact names who they were. And I just tell of the whole experience of the 2 years. You could say it was army in two parts. The first year was at Oudtshoorn, where they trained us up, and we went to the Southwest African border and into Angola. And the second year was when you were, as a first lieutenant, you were sent from Oudtshoorn and you got your second pip or star as a full lieutenant or a second lieutenant. You got that at the start of your second year.
Okay.
And depending on what your capabilities were, your personality, where they thought you fitted in, and where they would like to have placed you because you didn't get on with them and you fought with them, which I am unfortunately one of those people. I didn't take nonsense from anybody, including a commandant. So
Okay.
I've been in lots of trouble.
Okay.
And we had a term for getting into trouble when they had you out in the field, you'd get an opfok. And that means they would, excuse the French, they'd F you up.
Yeah, wow.
And they'd choose anything they wanted to. You'd hold your rifle over your head for literally half an hour, then down again, then up again. You'd hold split poles above your head if there were more than one of you. Then two of you would hold these split poles above your head. They'd make you run around with boulders until you couldn't anymore, and you drop them. And I ended up in hospital in the infirmary. I was there twice.
Sure.
The first time was an accident on my part where I got blood poisoning. Unfortunately, I was wearing what they call brown overalls, training overalls.
Yeah.
And I scraped my leg, the forefront of my leg, on a split pole, a very low split pole, because the guys were fooling around and the guy in front of me jinxed out of the way just at the moment I would walk past. Now, I didn't see the pole, and I just scraped my leg, and I thought nothing of it. But we didn't wash these overalls. We washed them once a week. We had to live in them like that. Yeah. And in that time, I got infection, and I was sent to the infirmary, and because my leg blew up like a football, a rugby ball, an American football. It was that size. And my best mate there, Ian Cameron, he said, you got to go. They've got to attend to it. You don't have a choice. You can't carry on. Your boot doesn't even fit you anymore. So he went with me to the infirmary, and they said, no, I must be taken up immediately. And I was. And that night they gave me penicillin, which I'm deadly allergic to.
Oh, my word.
And the next morning, the nurse came in and she started screaming. And I thought, what's going on? Because I'm feeling very itchy.
Yeah.
And I had water blisters all over my body. And she called the senior nurse in, the senior sister, and they immediately said, no, he has to change over from penicillin to one of the sulfonamides, I think it's called.
Okay.
And I recuperated from that. But the second time I was in the infirmary, they put me in there because of an opfok.
Wow.
It was that bad.
Sure.
And I think I was in there for between 3 to 5 days. They gave me ITB, which is iliotibial syndrome, where the tendons move through the bone in your knee area.
Yeah.
And they were so swollen and so inflamed that I couldn't even walk. So that was just one of the small things. But there were wonderful things too, and I'm not going to speak about them. I think people must discover them in the book for themselves. Yeah. I rate the book. The second year is the best part ever. I've had reviews and from all over the world. In fact, from a number of Americans who said that is the most incredible description that they've ever read about something about the Kruger National Park. And they've read a lot about the Kruger National Park.
Yeah.
But I lived inside the Kruger Park for weeks and weeks on end. I saw everything. We did everything.
Wow.
And
So interesting.
what an experience.
Sure.
Yep.
And I just love listening to you even now. You're clearly a storyteller. The way you describe a single event with so much detail, and I just love that. I'm not a well, people say I'm a storyteller, but not compared to you. But anyway, okay, that's awesome. So you actually haven't written anything before 2009, before this book?
I dabbled in stuff when my wife and we got engaged, and I started drafting our experiences in going overseas, because we had our honeymoon in Thailand.
Okay.
So I started drafting the bits and pieces that I thought were funny, that would make for a funny book. I never actually finished it. It's still sitting somewhere in a repository, a box somewhere of mine, and it could be finished. But I felt that there wasn't enough substance to it to really carry it through to a book. It could have been like a little novella almost, but not a full-blown book, because how long is a honeymoon? Ours was 10 days.
Yeah.
But the craziest things happened on that honeymoon.
Yeah.
And I could tell them to you, and I think they're incredibly funny.
Okay.
Especially the faux pas that I made in Thailand, thinking I was in South Africa. And not treating the culture the way I should. Not in rudeness, but just in riding a motorbike, trying to turn in the street, and I almost fell with the bike over in the street with all this oncoming traffic. You just got to take your gap there. They don't leave you a gap, you make the gap.
Okay.
So she found this hilariously funny, and she took a photo of me almost sprawled on the road with this little moped that I was driving.
Yeah.
And then there was a funny incident just that I thought was hilarious. There was a bridge that was out of order. They had heavy rains, and it had washed away to the left side. And somebody had written a sign that said, "Keep left." And I looked at this and I said to her, we've got to have a picture of this.
Yeah.
If I keep left, I'm going to ride into this river.
Yeah.
So that was just things like that happened there.
All right, so that was like the first time you really started.
I started to write, but the in the name of God was the real attempt to say, guys, this is what we went through. We were the chocolate soldiers. We were dressed in brown, and nobody knows what we did, and nobody knows what we got up to. And a lot of people think the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
But I promise you, it wasn't the case. There were incidents, and no South African can be proud of that, especially no white South African of that time. But for the majority, the guys were just wanting to get it done with. Finished and klar. Don't want to do this anymore. Don't even want to do the camps. Everyone was trying to get out of it. There's a term for it, and everybody knows what the term is. You jippered as much as you could. You tried to find every single which way to get out of a situation. We came up with creative ways that even to this day, people don't even know exist.
Okay.
And that's what it was really about. So for 2.5 years, I wrote the book, and I published in February 2012. I self-published on Amazon. It was my first book. And then I thought, do I want to write more books like this? And I did. I've actually come up with a book. I don't want to give the title because it is my intellectual property, and I think it is one of my best titles ever.
Okay.
But this is about, what is this life about?
Wow.
What does it mean? It's a huge thing. I go into a lot of the Christian belief system of why this life, what is it about, why are we here? But I also look at other people's views on it. Not necessarily Christians, those that are Hindus, those that are Muslims. I've read the Quran. I've read books by Hindus. I'm widely read on most subjects. Religious and otherwise. I've read some of the old scriptures that don't accord necessarily with what we are given today as translations in our Bibles. And the number of issues in the translations that are definitely wrong, and why they're wrong, and what a difference they actually make being wrong. So there's that part of me that wants to write a book about that and to share it with people. There are not many takers because they don't want to face up to the fact that there's a higher power than them. And I find this with a lot of my own family, a lot of my friends, and definitely with a lot of strangers. But the strangers are more receptive to it than family and friends.
Yeah, that's often the case.
Because a prophet is not recognized in his own town.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah, and I agree with you about the principle in the world, especially in the year 2024 where we are now. People don't want to acknowledge. People fight the whole idea of a higher power, of a God, of a creator,
Yes.
of somebody who is ultimately in charge. It's become all about, and this is going to lead on to the next topic, which is your Gen Z books, people living in this day and age, and especially people who were born in the last 20 years. It's all about me.
Yes.
What's in it for me?
Yes.
Which is actually an old human condition.
It is an old condition.
When you read the history books, whether it's the Bible or others, an old condition. It's always been the issue. But what's in it for me? Even people get married with the idea that, okay, what are you going to do for me?
Yes.
Etc. So that's certainly a huge topic. But I'm interested because the two books that you've talked about so far, which is the In the Name of God book, and the other one that's not yet completed, is clearly non-fiction. It's about life, it's about reality, it's about what you've been through in the armed forces, etc. But you also write fiction.
Yes. Well, let me just go back to the book that I don't want to give you the title of. But that one being about what is the meaning of life, it actually starts with my ancestors' lives. My father was given a book by my cousin, by Charles Warren, who was British.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the book was written in about 1909. And my cousin, I don't know where he found it, could have been at one of these fetes or a flea market or a bookstore.
Oh, okay.
And he picked it up and he gave it to my dad. My dad was basically doing genealogies of the Warrens, where we came from. Now, when I thought about us, I thought we were English.
Yeah.
I couldn't be further from the truth. Our name actually originated in France.
Okay.
We are part of the Normans that invaded England. So where does the name come from and why is it Warren? Well, we were called de Varenne, which means the origin of the river Varenne is where we came from.
Oh, wow.
And we joined the Norman army to go and conquer England because that was the done thing. And it is the one battle that the French actually beat the British.
Okay.
The Battle of Hastings, 1066.
Right. Wow.
And so the Normans basically took over England and took the lands away from the Saxons and the rest and the Celts that were living there. And they started bringing in laws and structure to a country that had nothing, besides what the Romans tried to do to the Brits and never succeeded either.
Yeah.
But this time, the French actually managed to take lands away and take ownership, but they also looked after the folk in the country,
Okay.
the English too.
Hmm.
Yes, they were against one another. There was a lot of animosity. The English hate the French hate the English even to this day.
Yeah.
They don't even want to speak each other's language.
Yeah.
You ask for directions in English in France, and you get French spoken back at you.
Mm.
And it's not exactly telling you where you're supposed to go. It's telling you where they want you to go.
Yeah, and it's not that they can't speak English.
Exactly.
They choose.
They choose.
That's it.
But in all of that, a few hundred years later, Cromwell came to power, and he subsequently banished all the Normans off the lands that they'd taken from the English. And so we were not landed gentry anymore, and we left as paupers out of England.
Wow.
So part of our family did marry English, but there's a huge part of Irish in us. And this is all on my father's side. So it's French, English, and Irish. And then on my mom's side, it is English and Dutch. So we're quite a mongrel breed, like most South Africans.
Yeah.
But I think that's what makes us really tough people.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So that's part of this, part of not the reason, but this reality of your family lineage is interwoven into.
Now that's correct. This is what I wanted to do, is capture it as far back as I could, which goes back to my great-great-grandfather. Now, the strangest thing of all is my great-great-grandfather, his name was William Booth. Now, there are many William Booths in this world.
I was going to say, that sounds familiar for some reason.
But he wasn't John Wilkes Booth who killed Lincoln. This was William Booth from England.
Okay.
But why is he famous in any way? Well, the strangest thing of all is he was the founder of the Salvation Army. My ancestor was the founder of the Salvation Army.
Wow, that's significant.
It's significant to a point that it seems good. But he had a son called Herbert, which is my great-grandfather. Now, Herbert unfortunately made a young girl pregnant.
Okay.
He was not married to her. She was not in his class. And in those days, class was everything. So she was rejected outright. He was not to marry her. And I don't know what was to become of the child. In fact, I think I'm making a bit of a mistake here. It was William who had the relationship, and the child was Herbert. That's correct.
Okay.
So William, he had the relationship, and her name was Ruth Warren. Okay. And so Herbert was born to Ruth Warren. He kept the name Warren, and William Booth gave a stipend for this young child for his whole life, and even got him a position in the British Army.
Okay.
So he got him a commissioned position in the army.
So he felt some sense of...
responsibility.
Right.
So now William, which would have then been my great-great-grandfather, and I don't know his name, said that there's not a chance that his son will marry Ruth. I think it was Ruth. You see, now I've got, this is where it gets a bit mixed up. I've got a step grandmother who passed away. She was also Ruth. So I think it could have been another name, but let's just say Ms. Warren took Herbert with her, and she brought him up without a father, but William gave money for them.
Okay.
And then he obviously married somebody else. I don't know the history of that.
Okay.
And what happened to Herbert was interesting, though. When he joined the military, because of his father's position in England and being the founder of the Salvation Army, so he took on a commissioned position, and he actually joined at the age of 13.
Wow.
In the British Army. And he went to various places around the world. He saw most of the world, like most of the Brits did then. They were the conquerors of the world.
Yeah, yeah.
And he ended up in South Africa. He was told to come to South Africa. But in the meantime, he married a lady called Wheeler from County Meath in Ireland.
Okay.
And her name was Catherine Wheeler, and she'd been fully Irish, but a Protestant Irish, not a Roman Catholic Irish. She fell for Herbert. Herbert was well brought up. He still, with a stipend and everything else, he went to the best schools. He was treated in a royal way, but without a father. So he was a bastard. But now this bastard, Herbert, was sent out to South Africa to do what? Here's now another incredible thing that happened. To round up the last of the Boers of the Second Anglo-Boer War who refused to give up. And where did he do it? He did it at Diamond Hill, Cullinan area. It was where the very last Boers gave up.
Wow.
And he rounded them up. He was on horseback, and they gave up because they were emaciated. The land was burned by Kitchener. It was a scorched earth policy. And there was no food. The women and the children were incarcerated in concentration camps, along with other English-speaking South Africans too, I'll have you know, because one of my ancestors on my English side was put into a concentration camp in Kimberley. And she had a necklace of very small Krugerrands, which the Brits stole from her. So they stole possessions there as well. So everybody went through all sorts of trouble.
Yeah.
What you think is the truth, the history of the world is not the truth. That's another passion of mine. And a few of my friends, we on various groups that I've started, and we deep into conspiracy facts, not conspiracy theories.
I like that.
So I've got a lot to talk about that at some stage. But now I want to get back to the meaning of life. It's such an important book that I can't even write another page. I'm stuck on Lucifer being cast out of heaven.
Okay.
And how it happened, to actually give it a backstory that makes sense, which you don't see in any Bible.
Okay.
But I found old texts that actually talk to what actually happened.
Okay.
And there's more to it than anybody knows.
Very interesting.
And that's where I'm at the moment. And the rest of it is about all my ancestors and my dad's young life, his brother's young life. My dad is Keith. He's passed away in 2017. His younger brother, Ian, passed away in 2016. But before they passed away, I got all these stories. I recorded everything.
Wow.
I've got everything written down that they've spoken about their whole young lives and everything that they went through in Pretoria, because that's where they were born and bred and stayed.
Okay.
And the things they got up to, which nobody would dare get up to today. Now that in itself is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
But what it leads on to is into my life, what happened to me. And that's the most difficult thing for me to put down, is I do it year by year, almost like a diary, but a yearly diary of the most important events, whether they're good or bad. And I can't get past those either. So I'm stuck at Lucifer and I'm stuck at myself. Is there a correlation?
No.
Don't know.
Very unfortunate.
I don't know.
That is so interesting. Okay, so let's just quickly talk about the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, you also write fiction.
Yes.
How did that come about?
Very simply, I got 2 children. I married late. I got married at the age of 40. My daughter was born a year later, and she was not born out of wedlock. She was born at the right time. So we got married in October 2003, and my daughter was born in August 2004. And then we had my son 5 years later. The unfortunate thing is my wife had a miscarriage in between, so we lost the child. So 5 years later, along comes this boy. My daughter's Kelly, and my son is Caden. And this boy comes along, and they fall smack bang into that generation called Gen Z. Now, Gen Z can be anywhere that I've read and researched, from 94 to 95 till 2011. But the most recent that they've settled on, the experts say it's 1997 to 2012. So my daughter's 2004, my son is 2009. They are Generation Z.
By anyone's the definition.
By anyone's definition, they still fall in the group.
Yeah.
Now, why did I want to write about that? Because I believe that Generation Z are not getting the direction that they need in life. And who am I to give it to them? I'm just somebody passing by, but I happen to be a father of 2 Generation Z children. So what do I want to do with my books? Well, my books are tough as fiction books.
Okay.
They are about ultimately redemption, but they do not start as redemption. They've been classed as Christian books, yet you cannot put them in the Christian genre because they do not fit there immediately. This is a build up to redemption. So the most horrific things start in my books. Now, let me give you an example of my flagship series, which is Herbie Hunter. Now, Herbie Hunter book 1 is called Herbie Hunter and the Twisted Furies. What's the Twisted Furies? Well, they actually come from Greek mythology. They were 2 sisters that caused havoc amongst the menfolk in Greece. This is how the mythology goes. And they did all sorts of terrible things to them. Is there some truth to it? Well, the deeper I dug, the more I found out that there is some truth to it.
Okay.
And I'm not going to go into detail about it yet. But now we start with Herbie Hunter and the Twisted Furies, book 1. The next one is Herbie Hunter and the Fathomless Legion. What is a legion? A legion is thousands and thousands of demons that can possess somebody or several people. Now, what is fathomless? Fathomless means a whole lot of things. We don't know where they came from. There's a lot of water in the book.
Okay.
There's a lot of drownings in the book. And so it goes on. And what Herbie Hunter encounters with demonic entities from book 1 through book 2 to book 3, which is called Herbie Hunter and the Genius Executioner. Now, what is a genius?
Genius. How do you spell genius?
There's various forms, but the form that I've used is DJINNIUS.
Genius. Okay.
Genius. But it means demon in the Eastern religions. Now, if you've ever seen some of these YouTube videos, you can see these people that are crippled, but they walk in a strange way. And there's one that I picked up where this person's limbs are inverted and they've managed to walk like an animal, and they look like an animal as they walk, and they can walk very fast. But now they've been demonized. They're actually humans, but they've been demonized by the people in those countries, by the Eastern people.
Okay.
India, Pakistan, further afield, you name any Eastern country.
That part of the world.
That part of the world, that name they know immediately. He's a jinn. And the other, their shortened version is JINN, a jinn.
Oh, okay.
So it can be a person who's possessed by a demon, or they are a demon.
Sure.
And now this one is demonic, and Herbie Hunter has to deal with this, and it deals with his family directly. So I've skipped over a whole lot of things that I could have told you, the start of Herbie Hunter and how it actually starts. But I think I'm giving the game away.
Yeah.
Lastly, there's a spin-off book called The Deep State Interchange, and it's a spin-off of the Herbie Hunter series. And in this book, it speaks about what we've just been through in COVID, lockdown, everything else. And I brought my own brand of, you call it what you want. Am I dreaming it? Did I make it up? No. There's a whole lot of truth to it.
Yeah. Yeah. What a hectic time in history we've been through.
Yep.
And the roll-on effects of all of that
Yes.
is still felt today, and probably will be
Yes.
for a long time.
And that is why I probably want to carry on with the Deep State Interchange, but I would welcome any author to join me. I have got it's a co-authored book. I didn't write it on my own. It's co-authored with another black chap in Cape Town, and he put a lot of effort into it. And we had a very good storyline guide, if you want to call him that,
Okay.
by the name of Ross Julius Henschel. And he's been a mainstay with all of my Gen Z books. And he's helped me edit them. He's helped me guide the story. He's helped me think things slightly differently. He's been a godsend to me.
Okay.
So I don't write everything just out of my own conscience and my own illusions in my head. There's other people to help me with that. So it's another form of PTSD, I suppose, that you could get, that somebody else is actually helping you become a bit loony. But I actually try and bring a whole lot of sense and a whole lot of fact and a whole lot of spirituality that people don't understand, and to guide youngsters. This is where it comes down to, what are you doing with your young life? What do you understand about your life? So a lot like my book that I want to write, the second one, about what is the meaning of life.
Yeah.
I'm putting the meaning of life now into fiction books, and they cover a vast variety. I do I don't call it horror. I don't like horror, but it borders on horror. But my Herbie Hunter books it's a very special form of magical realism. So it's real, but can it actually happen? Yes or no? Depends what you believe.
Right.
And Herbie Hunter's led to believe there's something more. And so more manifests into his life and into his friends' lives. And they don't understand what's happening, because this is when the spiritual world becomes more real than the real physical world. And now they have to deal with it. And how do they deal with it? Well, he has guides. He's got his grandmother. He's got a pastor. He's got his friends. And he's a clumsy guy, but he's a very likable guy. He's a flawed character, but he's the best of the flawed characters you'll ever find. And Herbie Hunter has to try and resolve what happens when things attack that you do not understand anything about. Why do the things happen to me that happen to me? I don't have an answer. And it's a lot of me in the book. Herbie Hunter is me. One of my names is Herbert. It's my great-grandfather's name.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that comes from the genealogy. Yeah.
And I don't often tell this to people, but my name is Michael Hilton Herbert Warren.
Okay.
Nothing to be glad about, nothing to be ashamed about.
No.
My parents couldn't decide the two middle names, so they gave me 3 first names. My mother decided on Hilton. She liked it. My father says, you got to have your grandfather's name. So I could have been Portuguese or any one of these people. I'm carrying all these names. So that's where my name comes from. But just call me Michael 𝐻 Warren. That's what I go by.
Okay.
That is who I am.
Yeah.
And my books say that's who I am.
Yeah.
And I believe that's who I am.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm really excited for more of the world to discover your writings, both the non-fiction and the fiction, because it just sounds to me like there's a greater purpose in it. I think some people write, well, we talked earlier about creating art, right? Visual art, music, whatever, dance. Many people create for themselves. They create for the personal satisfaction that they get out of it. But I think, me personally, I try to always create, even though I write a lot of choral music arrangements, and so on. I always try to create with a purpose.
Yes.
For it to make people think, for it to make people confront themselves with some issues in their lives. You know, there's always a greater purpose. And I think that's super, super powerful. So I really hope that more people will go and check out your content. It's very exciting to me. It's very exciting to hear your stories and how you think about it. And yeah, I think it's going to be a fun journey from here on forward.
I just want to add, although I call the Herbie Hunter series the flagship series, and really is, I believe that so much research and thought has gone into it that it really qualifies to be up there. I'm not just saying it because I'm the author. I had a lot of help. I had a lot of divine help. Not just the Ross Julius Henschels and the Kabisus who helped me with the deep state interchange. I had a lot of divine help. This is a gift that's been given to me that I can put down onto paper or type it out. My typing is awful. I never learned how to type, still don't know how to type. I think I'm the fastest 4-finger typist in the world. But that's me. But I do sometimes do voice recordings just to help myself because my brain is just too fast for my hands. I used to have notepads next to my bed, and in the middle of the night I'd wake up and I'd have to write it down because in the morning I couldn't remember what I had thought of. And it wasn't a dream. I wake up with a thought, not a dream. And the thought is, this is it. And I put on the light, and my wife would get irritated because it would wake her up and she'd have to turn over and away from the light. And I'd sit there by the lamp, the bedside lamp, and I'd start writing out this thing. And I start getting excited and I'll start writing the story already on this note. This note becomes a book to me.
Sure.
So I had a lot of that going on. I went through some strange times in writing the books, but I must say it's been an adventure for me. As you said yourself, you like creating for others. My purpose is not creating for myself at all. My purpose is solely to share what I know, the knowledge that I have, and the things that go on in my brain that I want to share with others that I believe have substance and have value. And to then share it with the world as best as I can, or share it with just one other person, just to pass it on. That's all I want to do.
Yeah.
So all of these things that I mentioned, well, I want to do more non-fiction biography type books. It may be about my family, it may be about me, but it's a story to tell others. These are the things you must watch out for. These are the things you can do. This is what happened to me. Can you take a lesson out of it?
Yeah, exactly. I was going to
Do
say,
you learn a lesson?
learn something.
Because if you don't learn that lesson, you're going to learn that lesson over and over and over again in your life.
Yeah.
So learn the lesson quickly.
Yeah, no, that's excellent.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Well, yeah, thanks again for spending the time. It was
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it very much.
We'll talk again in the future.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jan.